And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up for What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. We've not been back since the misery or defeat in Kansas City that kind of made you sort of think that there was more to be had, or should have been more to be had for last season. But we're looking ahead now to the next season. And as always, Mr. Nick Caserio keeps you on your toes, keeps you busy. I didn't really expect to be doing much of podcast because part of disappointment of not winning in Kansas City or winning in the playoffs was you shot your load last year, or what you thought you had of it. So cap space was tight, Paul. So we're here talking, but there's actually been a hell of a lot happened so far. But Paul recovered from Pop by. For anyone who doesn't know, Paul's a Liverpool fan. Have you recovered from yesterday?
Yeah. I think when you play as bad as we did, I don't think you really deserve anything, do you? So it's kind of one of them that you just have to hold your hands up and add that to a weekend of poor performances from the teams I follow. Being a pretty passionate Welsh rugby fan as well, it become quite a disappointing weekend pretty quickly. So, but could always be worse.
It's hard to begrudge a team winning a trophy in 70 years, I suppose, as a neutral. What it'll mean to that region of fans that have had nothing to support for. So if you listen from Newcastle, because there's a couple, good on you, enjoy it.
Yeah,
I suppose it's probably not as good. It's probably not as good as an FA Cup. Maybe that one's next for you, and it just shows you need serious petrol dollars to compete really now. In the elite leagues.
The big thing that, like, you know, I think every fan base is going this way. You know, the online reaction to it is there was questions of, would you be happy if Liverpool only won the league this year? It was like, that's insane. Why? Like I'd have give everything to win the league this year. You know, it doesn't matter what trophy it is. You want to win trophies every year, and only winning the league title I might just have to take it.
I know, and that is the ultimate loss of all perspective, isn't it? Really, because like that's the biggest achievement you can ever have as a football club, and it's the same as winning the Super Bowl. That's the good thing about this, I suppose. There's only one trophy you can win, so but to get dropped out by Qatar and Abu Dhabi in 2 days is difficult, isn't it? But there you go. The money often wins, and such is life. But anyway, we'll try and add a bit of perspective, and hopefully we'll talk some real life. Because if the Texans win the Super Bowl, there wouldn't be a podcast the next week because there'd be more important things to celebrate rather than talk about it. But sometimes this lets us process and make sense, and we've not been as consistent as we would have liked. But I think there's a lot of stuff, and we're not done it as regularly as I would have wanted. But you're sitting at times thinking, I've got a few opinions on some of the stuff that's happened, and it's been interesting, and that is the beauty of the league, isn't it? We're sitting here in mid-March, hell of a long time away from a game. We've got the draft coming up as well, the draft of which I have paid no time or attention to understand the prospects. I'll wait till we pick them, and then I'll have a look at them because I've wasted many hours that I'll never get back. So doing that before, just so I can sound informed in the lead up, but I'll leave that to others because that is a whole industry in itself. But I think we've got a good principle to comment on today. It's St. Patrick's Day. We're just talking about Paul's team just lost the League Cup final, which is one of the least of the four competitions, I suppose. And we're talking about money, but I tell you who's got the money today is Mr. Derek Stingley Jr. Paul, what was your first thought when I know you've been driving, but what was your first thought when you saw that? I suppose top line extending a quality player is of course good news.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think doing it ahead of time as well is probably a wise thing to do. I think if we tried to do it next year or whenever he's coming, I think he's coming out of his rookie deal next year, is he? I think if we were trying to do it then, with other players coming out, other cornerbacks being due contract at that point, whether it then increases the number we actually have to pay him, with how good he is probably a wise thing to actually set the market now and be ahead of it almost. Yeah, it's a lot of money. He'll reset it again in 3 or when that contract's up, I'm sure, because he'll still only be 20, 28, 29. So he's not an old guy. So yeah, I think on the face of it, it's a lot of money, but it probably makes a bit of business sense, really, doesn't it now?
Yeah, and I saw Troy Texans cap shout out to him, who tweeted out, it's 10.74% of your cap, which and the cap's only going to go up, and the cap's been with the background of the cap going up at the rate it's gone up, historic levels versus there was 3 to 5 year periods where it was completely flat. Obviously, the COVID year was an anomaly, but since Goodell's been commissioner of this league, the cap has rocketed. So, I context with what I'm about to say is the cap is going up. Therefore, that gives you an element of inflation that you have to account for in
Yeah,
medium term deals. Now, whether 3 years counts as a medium term deal, I'm not quite sure. I would have said 4 to 5 is probably in that. And of course, for a long period of time, there was a lot of contracts that were essentially 3 year deals with fourth and fifth years that were never going to be played upon. They were tacked on the back. They were stapled on the back of the backpack as the kid goes out for the first day at school, and they didn't mean anything. And I get that, right? I do get that. But I think Mr. Mugaleta or David Mugaleta of Athletes First, obviously infamy of being Deshaun's agent, must see the Texans as a bank. Because if you think about it, right, and this is I was just thinking about this. I ran home today from work. I always run home on a Monday. And you do your best thinking, I was thinking then, right? You know, if you're on booking.com, right, and you've got the sliders that you can decide what price you pay for your hotel. So you got the place where you take the high class holes into the £1,000 a night hotels, and where they're taking Instagram pictures of themselves in the lobby, and then you've got your shithole hostels at one end, right? And you can slide those sliders to cut them out. So if you think, well, I don't really stay in a hostel because I'm an adult, and then you think, well, no, I'm not going to that, 5-star hotel to pay £1,000 a night because I like tiles or I like granite work surfaces. They don't mean anything to me on holiday, right? So you can cut all that bullshit out, and you find somewhere that works for you, right? That's how the whole thing works. If the Texans were on one end with their position, they want to pay the player the least, and the agent wants to get the maximum. How far do you think any of those sliders were in the favour of the agent in terms of deals, because they want the least years possible, so you come back to the market and negotiate? How much do they want to exceed the market value by, and how much do they want the guarantees? They're the three main variables in this contract. I would argue that David Mugaleta slid all the way over to his table and said, here's the contract. In fact, I would actually almost go as far as question: did Mugaleta just post the contract to the Texans? They signed it and sent it back to him, because that is how one-sided this looks to me.
I don't even think he's used the sliders. I think he's just sorted by highest value, and then it's just come
and
up
gone from there. Yeah,
with us at the top and got that all.
because these chumps will pay. So like, I get it, right? I put, and I'll just again caveat, I put a bet on of my own earned money for Derek Stingley to win Defensive Player of the Year last year. That's how good I think he is.
Yeah.
He is the best cornerback play. Last year was the best cornerback play I've ever seen any DB play ever, I would suggest. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't flawless. I was there and I watched Watson beat him on an in-cut route to kill the game in Green Bay. He had a period of the year where he didn't get as many interceptions early, and it wasn't as good. Now, towards the end of the season, he was a guy playing at elite level who looked like he was steps ahead mentally and physically of his opposition. I get that, and some of the best play I've ever seen. So was he in a position to be rewarded at the top of the market? Yes, I do agree with you, Paul, in terms of you have to get ahead of the Sauce Gardner deal, because whoever got first, the other guy's going to get more. It's just the way it works, unfortunately. And that is that. But corner, and I do agree that maybe a 3-year, because it is a 4-year commitment in theory, because he's already got his 5th year, so extend his 5th year. I assume you tack these 3 on. That's my understanding of the deal. I may be wrong, but I think that's the way it works. So he's a guy who's had injury history. And that's something to be considered. So, and also cornerback is a position, just like wide receiver, when it falls off and he's gone, and everybody, and then they're staring up at the next elite athlete that's come through the ranks all of a sudden. But I just think it looks like, once again, whether it was the Nico Collins deal, whether it was the Danielle Hunter deal, and whether it was LT, we'll come back to him, so I'll not mention any thoughts on that. But those soft kind of 3-year deals that basically you only get 2 years out of it, and Danielle's only got 1 year out of it because now he's asking for another contract. It doesn't really let you long to sort of give you any time to plan your cash. And a guy who's got an injury history, to beat the market by 5 million. Don't get me wrong. Is he a better player than JC Horn? Yes. Does Pat Surtain's deal probably need updated? I'm sure his agent would argue yes. If you ask the Texans, should they do it for him? But I just think it's a bit fucking soft again, because it's one of these things. It's like we've just given out a really kind of short player friendly, i.e. agent friendly deal. In a time where we're going to have to, even if you compare it to the Jamar Chase deal, big deal, but only 3 years of those are in theory guaranteed. The T. Higgins deal gets announced at the same time. Only 2 of those 4 years are guaranteed in terms of cash. So it just feels like every time we've got a big extension, and look, there may be reasons for that, right? And there may be a better, grander overall picture that him, and when I say him, I mean it because by dealing with agents in that way means a lot easier to get deals done. He maybe gets other free agents, and there may be other ancillary benefits that you and I probably don't see when this news flash comes up. As I always say, we see the tip of the iceberg. But it just feels like we've given them everything on their terms at a point where every cap dollar is important. And trying to get this right, because you fucked it up last year because you didn't get it right in the defensive line, which we'll come back to. When you spent all your money in, and now you've had to restructure and move about deals, which is fine. You can do that if you're willing to spend the cash, which the McNairs are. But I think athletes first must see as a piggy bank. And the only reason why it bugs me is because you've got to remember it's the same agent for CJ, and we'll be in this position again next summer.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and I was just thinking whether you were saying about whether doing the deal with Mugoleta is kind of one of these things that you have to do. But yeah, I think we're going to be in the same position next year, year after, maybe whenever we decide to do CJ. I'm going to have to spend a bit of money there. I don't know. I've seen a few different reports on how much is guaranteed of this 90 million. Is it all of it, pretty much?
Well, it's 89, so I don't know why you feel guaranteed the 90. Do you know?
So I saw that from
Ian
Rappaport, but I saw another one a little earlier saying that was less of it was guaranteed. But yeah, if you're doing him for 89, 99% of his total, you might as well just do the lot, doesn't you? Really? How much of that is signing and bonus and cash money? I don't know, but it's yeah, it's a lot of money, isn't it? But I think of all the contracts we've given out, it's probably one of the most sensible ones in getting it done and getting it done early is the way I'm thinking about it. There's some other ones that just don't make quite as much sense now when you look back at it. And the injury things, always difficult with these young athletes, isn't it? They can go through some injury stuff early in their career, which can blight them a bit. But I think he had a fairly solid season last year with health. So maybe they're looking at the background stuff and the conditioning stuff and going, well, everything's pointing in the right direction, that he's going to be healthy and there's nothing outrageous that's going to happen. I think you just have to kind of cross your fingers with that one, don't you, really? So,
well, they only played 9 games his rookie year, and then just when the team was starting to get really hot in 23, he then pulled his hamstring the last play of a practice, missed a significant amount of time, and only played 11 games that year. So, I just think if you look at those 3 main variables, which effectively you're trading or negotiating with the agent, it looks like he's got the better deal. And look, it's not my money. I think you should reward guys for for elite talent. You should keep people happy. I appreciate the circles of the league is not a big community. So if you're hard to deal with, or you play hardball, or you make things difficult, that of course will have in theory negative effects because people won't want to deal with you, or they'll take their clients elsewhere. So there may be other benefits that I'm not aware of, but I just think from my understanding, which is not the same as Texans cap, I'm going to shoot him a couple of messages later and see what he thinks of it. But I just felt when you see this, I just think that we're very, very soft, easy to deal with. And that may get the deal done. I don't know. But it just feels like, what did we get out of it? Did we get longer term security? No. Did we get less guarantees for injury because he's got history? No. Did we exceed and some the market in percentage terms from 25 million, which was only just inked this off season? Yes. So, I get going back to those sliders. Whose side of the table was it closer to? And it looks firmly the agent. But look, if he plays 17 games for the next 3 years, nobody will care. He'll be up for deal. He'll probably get this deal done and redone probably in 2 years, three at the latest, depending on where the payment goes. But we're going to have to. I just think when you've got three players that are going to command top of the market, if you show you're soft and you piss away 15 million each by giving that extra 5 million, I know there's ways and means around the cap to convert signing bonuses and delay it and what have you. So there is ways and means to spend money if you want to spend the actual physical cash. Just look at the void years, which the Philadelphia Eagles do. Howie Roseman put four. I mean, is it 4 void years in a $2 million contract or something, just to basically kick it on. So, and then they take money out of the present. So look, we may start doing that with abundance. I don't know, but it just seems a little bit heavy. But I think I'm probably nitpicking. I think people know my opinion on Casario's ability to negotiate. If it is in fact him that's negotiating veteran contracts, it looks like the agent gets the best of him every time, in my opinion. Very rarely have we got a deal in, or has it been a general commentary of seems a fair one. Maybe the player's a little bit underpaid, And I think when you think of dynasties and think of sustainable quality teams, I believe you require an element of fair deals rather than fair deals for the agent, fair deals for the club, and that'll let you grow the overall wealth of the talent on the team rather than growing the overall wealth of one individual and one agent as he takes his 10% or whatever it is. So I'm sure he's checked his cell into the same room, Mr. Muggaletta, when he comes to Houston on the private jet. Which Cal McNair's paid a huge amount of his commission, his subdivision's commission. But good on them, I suppose. They're obviously good at what they do. We're just not the beneficiaries of that. They are, and their clients are, and that's their job. So I get that. But it feels like he's. It shouldn't be transactional. It should be relational.
It's a really good relationship.
It's fucking good for one of them, that's for sure. And look, we got a good player out of it, absolutely. But those we will be tight up against the cap when you've got three players taking up probably the best part of 150 million out of a 280 million dollar cap. So these things are important. It does seem like it now. And just trying to give a bit more detail and a bit more critical. I appreciate answer to it, but it's not just straightforward as we've handed out money. I don't think, Paul, because for the beyond your average thinker.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my phone doing the camera. I've just got my laptop underneath. I'm just looking at a website, and we've got him through till 2029. So however that works in terms of years, so we've got this year on his rookie, and then currently it's 10.7%, 10.74% of the cap is for Stingley. But as you said, that's going to go up, and if you get him down to the 9% JC Horns, is that better than how you do it in terms of cash? I don't know, but yeah, I think from where I am as a Liverpool fan, our three best players look like they might be out of the door at some point. Tying a very high quality, high talent level player down for a number of years is he's pretty good. Whether he spent a load of money or not.
It is. It's not our money. And maybe that'll weaken their position of not paying any renovations for the stadium and before they threaten to build a new one, which I think we all know they won't. But that's another story. There's been a hell of a lot happened actually, Paul. So we'll try and I was just saying it, Paul, before we start. We'll try and cover everything that we can. There's been a lot happened in the weeks. But look, Sting signed, cracking player. He's probably going to be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year if he plays all 17 games. He should have been last year, and it would have won me £1,800 if it was. But then there we go. John Weeks is departing out the building. Paul, the longest tenured Texan out. I think the longest tenured Texan now is between Kaimi Fairbairn and Titus Howard, who we'll come back to. But John Weeks goes, it's one of these things. It's better the devil you know at a position like that because he's been so flawless for so long. The consummate pro, big figure with him and his wife in the community. Everybody that speaks of him or has had anything to do with him has nothing but good things to say. He's probably, up there in terms of, the biggest contributions and consistency and professionalism as an athlete for the Houston Texans. But yeah, sad to see Weeks go. I couldn't even recall the name off the top of my head of the guy we signed to a futures deal. It did look like that at the time. I know it's been close to happening before, and then I found a way to come back, and he's been the preferred option at long snapper. We don't talk about special teams intricacies too much because it doesn't make for great listening, but I think John Weeks' 13-year innings, Paul, bit of a legend. I hope it goes well when you move on from guys like this because it's easy to point, and he's obviously signed for San Francisco as well, but a loss, without doubt.
Yeah, as you say, probably more as a person in the dressing room and as a character around the team. It probably wasn't. I don't think there'd be any performance-related issues with him as to why it's happened. So you got to ask a question around that. But I was kind of at the point with it where it was like, well, he'll just finish his career here at some point, won't he? When he decides and he's ready to hang him up, he'll do it as a Texan. Whether like with other players that happens and he comes back and signs a one-day contract and retires as a Texan, I don't know, but yeah, it'd be a shame to see him in a different uniform for sure.
Yeah, it will be. I think he's been Cosmic Pro, and I know Graham was up his last time. Struggling to join this week, but he said, nothing but good things to get to say about the guy. He's dealt with him directly, so hopefully that he will have some form of appropriate goodbye at some point. So moving on to tick it off through the list, the Texans' first move, and we'll go back to start free agency now, was to trade for Christian Kirk. They've redone his deal to minimise the cap hit this year. Obviously, with the Tank Dell injury, Paul, with Stefan Diggs still a free agent as we sit here today. Your number 2 and number 3 options were out the door. We had to make a move. A player who's proven himself in the league, had a couple of bits injury here and there. Obviously seen him in Jacksonville, most laterally after being drafted by Arizona, but a productive player who gives you probably a specialised and focused solution, I suppose, at the slot receiver position, which we probably didn't have out and out, or not a traditional one. I think he is that. I suppose compensation and all that considered. Paul, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't seen his the stuff about the restructure as yet, but I think we can, having read more about this stuff the injury that Tank had, and I'm pretty sure I read that he's had another surgery of some sort, whether it was minor or not, I don't know. You can pretty much write him off for the season anyway, can't you? So we needed to fill the gap for sure that Tank leaves, and when he's on it, he's a very good player to have around. I guess the question is whether we think Kirk and his value can be our number 2 receiver behind Nico long term, or whether we're still going to look to bring Diggs back if his knee's fully healed, and then have them both as an option. But just reading the contract, yeah, creating 12 million in salary cap space, which we've used up nicely today. So
didn't extend them. It was interesting, which I don't mind, to be honest, because it was only a 2026 6-round pick. So, it's fodder. Well, certainly Casero treats him like fodder, and I kind of actually agree with that, to be fair. I think that your chance of hitting on a player, unless it's drafting your best pick it's line, at a 6-round pick, which we'll come back to, is kind of fodder in some sense. So, I think it gives us position. I think there was kind of always a toss up between who kind of went into this slot. And look, we don't know. And I suppose we're trying to judge this probably unfairly because we've got a new offensive coordinator. Another thing that's happened as well, that's Chad Paul. But in another another John Carroll graduate, and I wish I'd have put money on it because as soon as I saw there was a John Carroll graduate who was with the Patriots, who, to be fair, actually turned down at least one offer, rumoured to be offensive coordinator elsewhere, but chose to stay in LA for another year. I think he will be. He's obviously got a good blend of being in the McVay and then also the sort of game plan New England offense. So it's an improvement on the sort of Shanahan traditional, plus also agility and ability to game plan, which I think so. It's the best of all worlds on paper. So quite what he will want that to look like, I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows at this stage. And hopefully, not a lot of other teams that we're going to play, at least early in the slate, will know either, because there's an advantage there. Hopefully, if this is a brand of offense that nobody was quite expecting. So that being said, I think we don't quite know where Christian Kirk will play because it's not going to be like for like offense. I hope not, otherwise we're in big trouble. So I think on paper, I think it's a good signing and not a lot given up. It's a player that you know is a pro. It's got good character and all that kind of stuff. So Christian Kirk, I am happy with. I think that was a fair one, and one that they got done early as well because it's slim pickings, and you want to have enough pros that you're not relying on rookies too much too early because you've got to give them some time to bed in. But definitely a spot, Paul. I think we'll probably have to draft one, if not two, depending on if they sign. If they sign one or two. I don't think they'll sign any more free agents based on the sort of special team guys they brought in, but they will definitely be drafting one semi high. If not two, I would think in this year's draft. Could go all 6 picks offense at this rate. You never know.
Yeah, I think the thing with, like you say, with Kirk, with having Collins there as well. If you're bringing in a rookie into that environment, you've got two guys that are very professional, haven't you? Like everything you see and hear about Nico is how professional he is as a player and as a person. So if you bring in someone into that environment, you hope it gives them every opportunity to reach the potential that they've been drafted for, really, isn't it? So you've got to hope that's the case. I think, like you say, probably no more free agents now. So is that the end of the Stefon Diggs in Houston time, or can we get him on a very minimal? Well, I just say a team-friendly contract, but as we just spoke about with Derek Stingley, we'll probably end up paying him $15 million or something like that, and find it somewhere.
Well, do you know, I agree. I
agree.
agree with the way they've handled that because they've obviously set a number. You kind of saw what he was. He lost that deep threat. Would you bring him back? Yeah, I would, because see if you well, I don't know. Again, I don't know what sort of formations is he going to favour 11 personnel. If he is, then you probably need you really need a wide receiver 4 that's good as your 3 and is not far off your 2. I would suggest if you're going to play that and you're going to have sort of heavy rotate the 3 guys, if you're going to have that out there consistently. So if there's a number that he comes back with, because ultimately it's a supply and demand business. As more teams spend their cap dollars and need to keep money back for their draft picks, their amount and willingness to spend on players, especially ones that are over 30, is going to be less and less. So you could potentially get him back, but he's going to learn the whole new offense. He's probably going to have to take a slightly different role depending on who and how high you draft in that position. So would you take him back? Yes, you probably would. But yeah, at the right number. And that's maybe, when you might think of being hyper overcritical, but that extra $5 million that you're paying, from, okay, not for another couple of seasons yet, but these are all the small margins that maybe allow you to bring guys like Diggs back, if you're perhaps less frivolous, in my view, in terms of extensions. But we'll see. I think if he comes back at the right number, I think I agree, Paul. Absolutely. I think the best move so far this off-season was shipping out Mr. Kenyon Green, the biggest bust of draft picks in the Caserio era by some distance, considering the other guys that were on offer. Kyle Hamilton. But I think getting rid of a guy and getting rid of a starting safety who has got a screw loose, I think it's safe to say, which I kind of like, to be honest, at times, because you want a hard edge. I think that was probably the best move Caserio's made. I think trying to get rid of something that had no value. It was unlikely that you were ever going to get a good tune-up. It didn't work here at his hometown. there was lots of kind of noises or inclinations or insinuations he just didn't love football enough. Injuries didn't help. Picked 15th overall. I still feel like I've got this nagging feeling of a video I watched that Lovie Smith really pushed for that there, just the way I saw him speaking to him at a pro day, at the A&M pro day. But anyway, it was Casero who made the call. It's his call at the end of the day. Biggest bust, but you managed to get the bust and get that out and get a guy back who can actually contribute in defense. So I think CJ Gardner-Johnson coming in on this defense, Paul, is a move to which you can Casero can be commended.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the defensive backs we've got now, it's looking like a really impressive lineup now, isn't it? When you think you've got like Petrie to come back, you keep like Caelan Bullock keeps growing, Lassiter keeps growing, and then you've obviously got an All-Pro on the one side. It looks like a really impressive defensive back room in there now. As I think is D'Amico's want, is going to be flying all over the place and making big hits, and not afraid to put themselves on the self and their health on the line a little bit with these hits. So. Which is really good to see, and I think that's the exciting bit, isn't it? As a fan, when you're seeing people flying around in interceptions, that's exactly what you want to see. So,
yeah,
at some point, you have to make a decision that you or admit that you've made a mistake. And I think for many fans, it's probably a year too late on the Green draft, but it's been done now, and I think we've got a really good result out of that trade.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's to be commended to realise you made a mistake, you're in a position, and to turn that into something that can help you going forward. Albeit again on one side of the ball, hopefully helps that side of the ball be even more dominant, because you're going to need that. I think if you can find a guy in rounds 1 to 4 who can be that third corner and complete that unit, I think you've got the potential to have a front and a back end of both elite measure, all being healthy. I think bringing Darnell Taylor in, who is a player I quite like. He's not had the round, but he's a coach's son. He was good at Tennessee. He's the kind of guy that you want to come on as fresh legs. Bringing Derek Barnett back again early in the window rather than a late pickup. He gets a bit more money, but truly and well deserved, I would say. That you've got the ability. I think you're maybe, and obviously bringing back Sheldon Rankins as well. I think again, we know there's no point sitting talking too much about that, because we kind of know what we're getting. I hope, as long as his health's still there. He didn't miss games. Obviously got a 2-year deal. Only made one of them. Only played half a season. So you never know. Bringing back Mario Williams as well. Danico Autry's taking a pay cut, I think, but it looks like it's to stay. He's a bit further past the wrong side of 30. So. But when you add all these pieces in with heavily invested in the defense, and again, I think all being well, this defense is going to be the leading unit on this team. But you've got a really good chance to have an absolute elite unit with the back end. You just need maybe one piece there, and just take whatever defensive tackle or linebacker or whatever falls in your lap in the draft. It doesn't really matter. Just keep filling the spine of the team. But I think just finding that one third corner, just so we're not too light, because we have been in the past there on the outside. Somebody that can come in and just fill in snaps. That could be, at the nickel as well as a boundary corner. I think there's a lot to be excited about this defense, Paul. I think it's. I was watching some games back the other day. I was just kind of sitting on a train, and I'd had a couple of things downloaded on my phone just from the last time we spoke, and there was some great moments last season. I think that where we really took it to teams.
Yeah, no, I think it's like you say, it's really exciting, and if you've got a really, really elite defense, as I think we proved a couple of times last year, the offense does not need to be lights out, firing 100% every single time they take the field, because you've got a defense that'll actually do the job. And I think you have to have a balance of that, because it's very, very rare that you'll have all three phases of football will play lights out every week. So sometimes they have to balance each other out, and you add enough talent onto one side of the ball, it means that you can do that more frequently for sure, doesn't it? And then maybe, and I'm sure that will continue to help us, which is super exciting. And everyone likes seeing big tackles and interceptions and stuff, don't they? So and sacks, and it's always good. So I'm sure it'll get a lot of people off their seat seeing them flying around doing that. So.
Yeah, and I think when we've invested again, and look, special teams let you down in a big moment last year. Last time we spoke about in Kansas City, and they've invested heavily in Watson from Kansas City wide receiver. He's maybe going to be your fourth, fifth option, which should be an upgrade on what we had last year. Expect guys like Robert Woods to be gone. I think that's rightly so. They brought in the guy Neiman, the linebacker, who's they probably see him on a 2-year deal. Or Neiman, sorry, he's a predominant special teamer, and they brought back Tremon Smith, and in theory, depending on what he gives you in cornerback, is the highest paid. I don't like classing guys special teams because at some point they will have to play offensive or defensive snaps, so it's a little bit unfair at times. Berrios as well, who's a returner. Tremon Smith comes back in a 2-year deal, which is punchy considering his expected role. There may be more from than that on the defensive back, and that may be the guy I was talking about. That might just be him in spots. But I think we've invested in special teams as well. So I think and on paper, has the defense got better? Yes. Have they invested in special teams when things let them down? We'll see if there's any hiccups with a new long snapper after having a long-standing stalwart in that position. Absolutely. I think all that stuff's looking good. I think it's hard to really criticise them. But this is a point-scoring league, and you've got to be able to move the ball, and hopefully the Nick Cayley edition will conquer a lot of those issues. Hopefully the Cole Popovich offensive line coach, albeit he was assistant last year, will better coach these guys and improve it. But the biggest problem on this team, Paul, was the offensive line. Now, Lakeland Tomlinson, one season where he played in between Alex Mack, Pro Bowl, and Trent Williams, Pro Bowl. He also got a Pro Bowl. That's his only one of his season. He's well over 30. He's about your only signing of note. We've traded for Ingram. I forget his first name, who was benched last year, who was equally statistically bad at getting beaten one-on-one and giving up pressures as Kenyon Green was. So that's the sort of level of play in his recent past that we've taken on. And again, late round pick. It guarantees you get him in the building, guarantees the contract, etc., etc. You get him in. I get that. We just gave Minnesota the pick back that they gave us for the tailback that we sort of gave away last year. And I've forgotten his name. That's how significant it was. But he gave us good snaps at the start of the season. But on the face of it, and the biggest news story, of course, so far anyway, and probably one of, if not the biggest trades in the club's history, and there has been a few of late, and trades have been more common and more, there was all the Herschel Walker trade, and then, trades were less common, but, you got a younger, more agile kind of thinking generation of GMs that are more happy to make trades, right? So when we first traded for Laramie Tunstil, two ones in a second, you kind of then got a similar trade with Jalen Ramsey. There was also one for Jamal Adams, which was definitely the worst of the three. So, it's not all bad. But I suppose, Paul, that the point that I kind of come back to was, character issues and offensive line room toxicity that was described in some circles in the media. There was obviously a cultural problem there because the offensive side of the ball did not play anywhere near the same attitude as the defensive side of the ball. It was like they went on the same team. I think everybody could agree with it. Stevie Wonder could have told you that watching that team last year, right? So that was obvious. That needed address. But I didn't actually think you would address it by getting rid of your best player, because I suppose when you've got a clear problem, getting rid of your only sort of passable solution in-house kind of seems counterintuitive, I suppose, on the face of it.
Yeah. I think the first time I ever come on the podcast with you, we were talking about who could be the face of a franchise, and at that time it was only it might have been during the Deshaun stuff, but I think I said that Tunstil might be the only person that could potentially be that. So it seems like a long time ago now, but the only thing I can think of is that it is a character issue there. You paid the guy last, was it last year or the year before? You paid him a bit of money, and then I've got in the back of my head somewhere, I've got about last pre-season where basically he had some off-season knee surgery, which happens. Players can have that. It's part of the league. It's a physical thing. But then I'm pretty sure he turned back up like the week before the first game, and then had about 10 false start penalties in the first 6 weeks or something like that. And it just, performance wasn't enough. And, I don't think there was ever, I'm sure he made some comments around it where there was no like accepting responsibility really for him and his performance and his play in that period. And I think I said earlier about bringing in a good veteran with maybe a rookie wide receiver, to help him develop. I think as much as I think Green wasn't worthy of a first round pick, when you've got him working day to day with somebody who maybe isn't 100% all in on everything he does about being a professional athlete, I think that type of thing rubs off on people, doesn't it? That if he's got to this level and he's like that, I don't need to be all in as well. So I think the decision to trade him probably lines up the fact that we'll go O-line in the draft again, and hopefully we've got better at evaluating O-linemen in the draft. But yeah, we see where we go with it. I mean, it says something that one of our better tackles last year was Blake Fisher, who was a rookie, had no, and I think when he come in, he performed well and was, apart from a couple of things, was fairly, didn't really hear his name mentioned for anything good or anything bad. So it's kind of what you want really sometimes.
Yeah, Fisher wasn't physically ready. I think he admitted that himself at some point, and that was obvious. And he got snaps later, but they kind of put him in right tackle and they left him there. So you kind of think he's going to be there, and we'll come back to that drafting point to get us out. But on the Tunstil thing, and the reason why I kind of get a bit irked at these 3-year deals with high guarantees and all player, because you've got to remember. So if you give a player a short-term deal, that adds to the leverage and the control of time to the agent and the player. Houston never recovered from not signing Tunstil to an extension when they traded for him. They never recovered from that. Right from the point where he played his first snap when they should have won in New Orleans on that Monday Night Football to kick off that season, when he was excellent that night, to the last snap he played in Kansas City this year, or the end of last season there in January. They never recovered from that. They had to extend him twice in that time period because you've outlaid all this capital. You've got no choice to extend him. He's your best player within that group. Now, the key word there is group, right? Because he cared about himself, and he's a businessman first and foremost. And look, fair play to the guy. I actually respect him. He negotiated his own contracts, and he actually said that. He says, I don't need to pay an agent a fee. He says, you just learn the terminology, and he actually negotiated that with Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby. Now, I think that says a bit more about Jack Easterby than it does and their ability, or the fact that
from the past.
or the fact that they were put in that position to negotiate a deal with a top of the market player and didn't make him sign a deal, because I'm sure it was either Lane Johnson or the other tackle at the time was about 16, 17 million at the highest point of that. They could have easily signed him to maybe a 16, 17, maybe 18 million. He ends up then getting 20 something, and then he ends up getting 26 on his last deal or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So the inflation that you incurred by not being proactive with contracts. Jerry Jones is the best at delaying because he thinks he's going to get the best deal. A bit like how we praised the Stingley deal, but the inflation incurred because you don't get the deal done early is disproportionate to just paying it, right? So we then were caught in this tide wave of leverage against him at all times for 2 extensions, and it's certainly believed that the trigger point was he asked for another one. But if you give a guy a 3-year extension and he's still, and the bulk of the guarantees are all set, why wouldn't you? I mean, fair play to him, right? So he's come back. So by giving these short-term deals, you then basically trigger a renegotiation far quicker than you would do if you just tack on the extra year, because you can go, well, actually, Larry, you've got 2 years left of your deal. We'll talk about it in a year. Whereas at the end of this year, he would only had, well, I know he's got 2 years on his deal now, so he's only played 1 year of that deal. But basically, at best, you can push back that conversation into the future to see where his health, his form, which are all much more variable than the money that you fix by guaranteeing contracts at such a high level of guarantees, right? So we kicked it down the road as far as he could. But at the point was we gave the agent, who was himself, and the player too much leverage by giving them soft, high guarantee, short term contracts. So I hope this doesn't reoccur itself with Stingley, but it looks like it might. But that sort of pressure never eased itself. So he's asked for another one, and that was the point of going, well, we can't keep doing this. But do you know what? But then you are going to do it because you're going to be in that position with Nico Collins in 2 years' time, because he's $5 million underpaid the top rate already. And I don't think you'll quite get there with the corner market, because we've exploded that one. So maybe they bought themselves a bit of future proof in there. But they never recovered from not signing an extension at the point of trade. So I don't know if he's done that with Washington, for nothing I've seen so far anyway. So maybe they've not learned from Adam Peters. There's not learned from our lessons. But he was a captain of a unit which was failing at almost an unprofessional level, and he wasn't arsed, and he was putting up his signed boots from Beyonce after we got absolutely railroaded on Christmas Eve, and ruined and probably caused a lot of fights in a lot of people's houses on Christmas. Lest we forget, about the fans. So, he didn't really care. He was more about him and the brand and doing those videos with the divine tree or whatever it is, and the investments off the field, and fair play to him, right? He was going to earn as much money as he possibly could for the shortest time he could, and then it'll be done. So, giving him another 3-year deal, I don't think he would have maybe even seen it out, because he's set the market, and probably will set the market again for that. But he didn't give you enough in the run game. He wasn't a leader on the field, and he definitely didn't do enough to develop the players around him. So I think in the balance, I think you've got to hope that, because I went to Kansas City and I went to Green Bay, and both those games, the offensive line gave up 12 sacks, looked hopeless, stupid penalties. Minnesota on the road, when we got our arse handed to us on that night as well, with stupid penalties. That was the biggest issue, or that was the fall point of this team, was that offensive line. He wasn't interested in fixing that, because it didn't mean enough to him. He was just happy to get his good pass protection stats and pick up his generous paycheck. Fair play. A lot of people do that, but in this sort of privileged position, people looking for more. So I hope, Paul, that all being said, it was a self-created issue. They've potentially fixed it, albeit you've not got much draft capital to spend this year, bar a third-round pick. The second you got is next year. But hopefully improving the culture of just 5 guys that are committed and are willing to fight for your quarterback. The best one was Jared Patterson, was the only one that went over to CG when he was hobbling on the road. I don't know if you saw that clip. And I remember thinking at the time, and actually a lot of times, not picking up people at the pile, not helping the quarterback, people getting late hits, not getting jawing with the other team's defensive line. We were soft on that side of the ball. So hopefully maybe getting rid of Shaq Mason, which was a little bit unfair, but maybe there is an addition by subtraction, by clearing out a culture which wasn't geared about the team. And for when all the stuff you hear people preach, I think at least they've shown an intention for the team to be that on both sides of the ball by making the changes they have.
Yeah. Like I said, the only thing I come back to is a culture thing. If you want to let him walk out the door, and you said about it being a group, and yeah, I think at times last year it definitely wasn't that. When, like you say, Patterson is, I can't remember where we picked him up. He was a lowish round pick, wasn't he?
He was 6th round, yeah, late on.
And he's one of the more determined, better attitude kind of guys than the guys that should be the 2 first-round picks that we've got on that line currently, or last season, the 2 first-rounders we had there. So you'd like to think that with a change, clearing out some personnel, it gives everybody fires a shot across everybody's bows that that level of performance and that level of intent and attitude isn't going to be accepted round here, and we've all got to pull our socks up and actually start performing and start fighting, because you've got multiple different units on the field on offense and defense, and that was the one that was very much letting the side down, wasn't it? So something had to be done, and I think this is, however painful it could be, and I think it's probably the one that fires a warning shot to everybody, doesn't it?
I think it should, and we'll come back to the guys that are still here. But I think when it was referred to the toxicity, it's almost like I've got an image in my head of Chris Strother last year, who was ultimately in charge of that offensive line, who was ultimately in charge of Bobby Slowick. Both those guys had been sacked, so it was that bad in that room. You got both the coaches sacked, and you almost can kind of imagine, well, this isn't good enough, guys. And then Laramie Tunsil sitting there going, well, who the fuck are you to tell me? Mm-hmm. I've reset the market twice. I know what I'm doing. You need to coach the other guys.
Yeah, I know the Pro Bowl is now just a bit of it's just a bit of a vanity project, isn't it, really? And I've no idea how he got selected again for another Pro Bowl. I just confused the life out of me. Seeing him there and representing the Texans there, it was just baffling. So he gets to go home however many time Pro Bowler, but performances last year weren't good enough for him to be in the Pro Bowl, in my opinion.
No, and all pro is the marker. Pro Bowl is handing out lollipops after a haircut. You know what I mean? It's like not I've had one of those for a long time, but it's a token gesture, is my point. And and again, it's maybe in the contract. We don't know the details, but Stingley, you go, well, I'll tell you what, we'll let you reset the market by $3 million, but if you make another Pro Bowl, we'll give you a $2 million bonus. How about that? So there is some incentive to perform and maintain at what the level he showed he can be at. But I don't think I think Tunsil's made one All Pro, so he never really got the heights of when you and I know he's an older player now, but when Trent Williams is out there in the run game, I wouldn't want to get in his fucking way. That's for sure. Do you know what I mean? Because the ball's only moving one way at that point, and the momentum and the force and the will that these guys want to put on the game and on their opponent by definition is something that helps you win games in tight spots. So despite that part of the team not being good enough, this team was quite close. But the problem is these windows are finite, and the whole team, it was an organizational failure that culture was allowed to happen, that the talent was misevaluated, and it was poorly coached and it was poorly executed. So fair enough, you've cleaned it out, but good guys like in those positions, bar say Dalman, who was the big free agent signing from Atlanta to Chicago. There was some guys that were getting paid mental contracts. I don't even know who they are. The backup that got the money from Baltimore was it either the Jags or the Titans got a mental deal. There was the Chiefs have overpaid and a crazy price for a guy who's not really a starter. So again, supply versus demand of the offensive line. Good guys don't hit the free agency. When people are saying, when you read these free agent articles, Ronnie Stanley, number 2, is like, there is no fucking way a good and well-run organization like Baltimore is going to let a guy, unless he's done physically, is not going to let a guy like Ronnie Stanley leave the building, right? It just doesn't happen. So by losing a quality player at a position where talent is so scarce, Paul, does the return on paper for Laramie Tunsil justify making that move?
I guess it's one of them where time will tell, isn't it? What do we turn them picks into? Do we think that the overall improvement on the line by making that decision, by having a better culture, a better working attitude, better working environment for everybody there, gives us the 5-10% improvement that we need to take it on to the next level? And I think that's the thing, and that'll be difficult to tell. Obviously, with our record of drafting O-line, it doesn't give you much confidence that we're going to draft a good one. But I think I read the other day they were planning on Fisher being right tackle and Titus being left tackle. I think was the current plan.
Now,
but
do you know what?
know,
Do you know what? That
know
doesn't actually scare me as probably much as it logically should, because if you think of, and I always say to people, tell me a stretch of games that Titus Howard played. Now, he was not at his at tackle playing weight. I think that was clear from his physical appearance last year. But I do remember a time where he strung 4 or 5 games together at left tackle and looked really good. And then I remember sitting in the conversation going, do you know what, maybe you could just put him at left tackle and didn't have to give 2 first and a second away, and you could have put that against the rest of the roster, maybe even in the rest of the line, and actually drafted great players. And this is the worst thing, it just popped in my head, so I need to say it. If you remember the draft where we pitched out all those picks, 2 firsts and a second, don't forget Kenny Stills, social activist, played about a season and a half. Remember halfway through that season, the game was still going on. He's got the helmet under his arm. He's not going back in this game. It was one of these lost games towards the Cronell coach team after O'Brien got sacked, but it all started to go downhill. Anyway, Kenny Stills, don't forget that throwing. But if you remember the interview at the time, and they said, well, good tackles don't come out in the draft. And actually, to be fair, in the sort of 2 or 3 years up to that point, there hadn't been many good, but that class was the best class of tackles in 2019 that there has been for a long time. Tristan Wirfs and all those guys that all came out. There was numerous, even I think it was Mekhi Becton, was that he went first. I think Wirfs went third, and then the left tackle, I forget his name for Cleveland, but again played well, been quality player. There was about 2 really good solid options you could have traded up for if you wanted to. But that was the reason why they get it at the time. But I think actually Tunstil, you take him out, the culture must have been piss poor rock bottom stuff that got to that point that you're willing to give up. Now, can we replace him with the assets derived from the trade in this season and as a 3rd round pick? Maybe. You might be able to do it. Are you going to have to use that second from 2026 and trade up 25th to get one of the guys? Will Campbell from LSU? You got the cat from Missouri, and then you've got the other one. My draft knowledge is terrible anyway. I have not spent a lot of time. Basically, there's 3 picks that may go, and most of the good offensive tackles don't really make out the top 15, and that is about the limit of your. So you're going to have to. A team that needs picks is probably going to have to spend picks to get those sort of 3 elite guys. But we don't really have the luxury of doing that. So it kind of jars, I suppose, trading a left tackle, if all things being equal, kind of jars with the position of you're ready to win now, which they thought they were based on all the money and the guarantees and the contracts that they spent last off-season that's prohibited them from perhaps doing things they would have wanted to do this off-season. Now, they've restructured deals. They've got some picks in. I am all for trading out guys who you think are about to dip. If you get picks back for them and you hit with them, fair play. But if you look at Caserio's first 2 drafts versus his last 2 drafts, they've been much better. Now, that may be them getting the process right, better communication with scouts, better reports, better technology to review tape, better understanding with the coaching staff, whatever it might be. But it's going to have to be this last 2 seasons plus more. But the bit that you just can't get away from, Paul, is they've never drafted an offensive lineman yet who's been a quality starter. And they probably need to do that twice.
Yeah. If you look at, like we said earlier, if you look at the line, probably one of the better performances has been guys they've just picked up in like the 5th or the 6th round because they're there. And yeah, we can always take an extra centre. You can always take an extra guard and see how they go and see how they develop. And the top of the top. Talent be the wrong word, but the top guys that go in the draft, we don't seem to be very good at finding or picking. But there will be guys further down who will come in and just be on it from day one, who bring an attitude that they want to get better, want to improve, want to, do everything they can to help the team. And I think, sometimes that's more important than a really, really top talent, isn't it? When you hear, I'm do a lot of time driving and you listen to all this stuff about culture and stuff, and often it's better to have 5 people who are all 80% good culture guys than have 4 and then one person who's a top performer but an absolute nightmare. So I think that's probably where we're at with it now, isn't it? So get guys that have come in and want to work hard, want to buy into the team and the program and everything, and go from there. And I think that's what you can hope for.
Exactly, and I think you probably need the Kalen Bullock version of guard this year. You probably need the Kamari Lassiter center, or even maybe tackle this year. But I think Kelvin Banks from Texas, that was the other one I forgot. Well, it's Will Campbell, sorry, apologies, and Armand Mabembu from Missouri. Josh Simmons is a transfer that wasn't at Ohio State when CJ was there, other tackle. Had injury problems, as is Kelvin Banks. So, look, ultimately, I think if you hit with 2 interior guys, you could maybe get by with the bookends of Fisher and Titus, if Titus can get healthy. But I always think if you're going into a season reliant on rookie talent for production, that often isn't a means to success. It was last year, but how many teams draft 2 defensive backs who play really well, stay healthy, turn the ball over, and make an impact? That's quite rare, and I think you can't just expect people to do that every off season, because when you think, I saw a bit about the Bengals extending both the wide receivers at huge money, right? And we're going to kind of be in a similar position to that with the Will and the CJ trade next year. And they said, there's a recognition within the building, they must nail all the draft picks. Well, in theory, you want to nail all the draft picks all the time. So, that's not a new belief that you have in the system or in the program. By the system in which you draft, I meant to say. But there is a reality that we're going to have our room for error in the next sort of 2 to 3 drafts if we want to keep the nucleus of the team together and be challenging better than we were last year, not losing stupid games on the road or not losing to Detroit on Monday Night Football when you could easily beat them. But you've got your margin for error is thin and becomes thinner as the big contracts like Stingley and the other guys take up a bigger percentage of your cap. You've got to keep the pipeline churning underneath. So to think you're going to do all that on an offensive line by then potentially risking not taking best player available and letting a guy go who you might be really high on, but you've created a big need by having to fill voids in the internal spots, you can argue it's going to be tough. And none of this is easy. I get that. But drafting or being reliant almost solely to have a line that's going to be functional, or might even, God forbid, actually try and win you games at times. To do that through the draft when you've shown after 4 drafts as a GM that you can't do it, I think it seems a little bit foolish to think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is we're kind of relying on Titus staying healthy as well, which has been a problem for every year he's been here. So you kind of, you do need to shore up that. If he's going to play left tackle, you do need to shore it up with somebody else backing him up and a decent player backing him up, because at some point he won't be there, whether that's for a game, 2-3 games, however long that is. You can imagine that'll happen. And then you're running an offensive line with a 6th round pick at centre, a 2nd-year player at right tackle, and 3 rookies. It's difficult, isn't it?
No, and look, if you, and again, you need to see the aggregation of the depth of positions across the board to make this call. But the good quality tackles and guards, I hope we don't draft another guard in the first round, but these are the kind of stuff that puts pressure on people in their jobs, because if you get it wrong twice, if you take a guard high, that's difficult. And actually, I almost think that experience might limit them from doing that. But that being said, Paul, we probably won't do another show unless something major happens till after the draft. Maybe do some pre-draft ones. But if you were to guess, what position do they take now that we've kind of seen the roster fill out a bit more? What position would you say they go after in the draft? Whether that's trading back into the second, out of the first to 25th. But all being said, now where do you think they go?
I think they go line, but I don't know whether that's what position on the line. But I think they take somebody. There's a thing in the back of my head saying that we'll do wide receiver quite high as well, but I don't think we'll probably go quite that high in the first. There's usually some pretty good ones around, isn't there? So into the second. So whether we do that, but I think, yeah, I'd quite like us to try and just take the best talent available, really, whatever position that is, and just go, right, we're going to solidify here. And if we have to pick up players lower down to come in and do jobs, we do that. But I think from all the moves they've made so far, it's pointing me more towards them doing something on the line as high as they can.
Now, I've just had a bit of a thought. And if you think of San Francisco, and if you think of where Nick Cayley's just come from in LA, they've done a really good job of just finding guys that fit their system really well in the third, fourth, fifth round, and they've continued to do that. And they've not actually spent premier picks really on that spot. Now, there is only one position, obviously, put quarterback aside, there's only one other position that's more valuable than offensive line. And whether Danielle Hunter gets extended this season, they might extend him for salary cap position or space, moreover, reasons more than anything else. Obviously, his output, was unquestionable last year at times, but we went missing towards the end of the season a couple of games. Edge rusher is apart from quarterbacks, the most valuable position, and you're not going to be able to pay big money to Will and Danielle for more than probably a year window. So if a player falls to them, now again, I'm just reading your names here, so don't take my word. But if a player falls to you, look at there's only three names there, and Abdul Carter is going to go on top. Even I know that. Then you maybe want to think about taking an edge rusher because it's one of those things like cornerbacks. You can never have enough of them, as Rick Smith used to say. So I don't know if there'll be a shock, or is wide receiver too obvious because you've got about 4 or 5 teams ahead of you that are probably all wide receiver needy in theory in the draft. So I mean, look, I think we're in a position where the only one that would seem essential is guard. But then, are you going to find a guy that's going to fault you at guard, for example, and then risk the psychological scrutiny and pain as you put that card in? Considering your career to date GM miss was Kenyon Green. I don't know if it shouldn't, and I don't think it would. But everybody's human and they doubt themselves, So would they fear in making that same mistake again and actually, potentially making that mistake is a possibility. But I always think running back, wide receiver, you have got no excuse in the modern day game and the way college is developed to have a shortage of those on your team. So I think you can pick those guys up later. The trench, I think it will be a defensive or offensive lineman early. I think always should be that way anyway, unless there's just a talent that drops to you that you just never foreseen. But yeah, I've got a sneaky feeling they're going to have to add to either probably the defensive line because they just can't throw enough at that out of principle. It seems the way, but
yeah,
but hey, we've gone through a lot now.
Yeah, I've always got talk about defense. I've always got a soft spot for a big, horrible tackle, defensive tackle, just somebody that is just horrible to play against. And the Eagles won it last year, and they've got 2 of them. Two big, horrible guys that like moving offensive linemen around, and I don't think you can't have enough of them, no matter where you pick them. So they're important to have.
No, well, that's it. It's hard to get beat when you're a team that's good up front. And you certainly give yourself a lot of chance. So yeah, it seems like that's almost a necessity in some ways. If it's part of the philosophy or not, you never know. Caserio continues to surprise. He'll move about and hopefully create some value, because I think those trades up for Mechie or, up for Christian Harris, which probably hasn't quite manifested itself in the talent and output and the production on the field. He's going to hit one of those at one point, in the same way that he did Nico up in the fourth. So, again, a guy who, let's be honest, we probably can't have him not playing 17 games next year if we want to go and win 12, 13 games and put us in a spot to play multiple playoff home games, because that's what it's all about now. The bar's been raised now, so we get to be picky about corner extensions and whatnot. I'm sure there'll be some people probably turned off at that point. But anything else before we get out of here?
No, not from me. I think it just, all eyes look to the draft now and best start looking at players that we might pick.
Yeah,
I have an idea of what's about.
That's it. I'm going to wait and actually watch them properly once you pick them, because I did a whole draft board one year, but I don't have the luxury of that time anymore, so that's for sure. But no, this has been great. I think there's a lot of thoughts just percolating there that we've cleared them out, and a lot of big moves and a lot of decisions that are going to, probably change or direct the trajectory of where we'll be in the next 2 or 3 years, because these are the things that if they go well, you're cooking with gas. If not, then heads might roll. So the question of the line, I think we'll probably be talking about well into the season. That's just the nature of it. I think the complexity and the resource required. I think we said last time, isn't going to be fixed in 1 year. So I don't think that's changed. If not, it's probably got harder. But hey, well, it's been interesting. Thank you very much, Paul, for his time this week. Thank you again for listening. We may be back before the draft if there's something interesting happens. But until then, thanks once again for listening.